Hey, I'm Steve, and today we will be reading through the very first chapter of our novel, Fall of Imperium. This first chapter sets the stage for what's to come. It introduces us to the Empire, the history of the Empire, how it was founded, the magical forces at play, and one of our main antagonists slash protagonists in the process, in the form of Emperor Naquiro. I hope you enjoy it. Think about how we could make this better together, and let's do this. Introduction to the Empyrean Academy textbook, 3rd Revised Edition. Foreword. If you had met me in the year that I founded Imperium, you might have been surprised at how inconsequential I was as a person. I mean this both from a perspective of inherited social status and on account of my achievements to that point. My family did have some rank within our small kingdom, but our wealth and power were in title only. My father frequently fretted that if it were known how little we truly had, even his titles would be stripped, and we would lose the few privileges we had. As the third son of that less than illustrious house, I had no illusions of inheriting or of ever becoming a lord myself. And as hard as this may be to believe now, I was never very ambitious. I did have a healthy serving of curiosity, however, and through it came to develop some small skill in the sciences. Even so, I considered myself extremely fortunate when I landed an apprenticeship with the great warlock Vanaril. Mind you, this was not some elevated position that would have led me to becoming a master of the arcane arts. Each year, Vanaril would take at least a dozen or so new apprentices under his wing. He would teach us a few basic skills and abilities, and then leverage us to fulfill any requests for the kingdom that did not require his advanced expertise. We were his servants more than his apprentices. Sure, there was some minor prestige in the position, but the truth is that any protege of the mighty Vanaril had a very short life expectancy. I remember once being sent to handle a small troll, only to find that said troll was actually a full-grown male, 3 times my size. The client had severely understated the threat that it posed, in hopes of paying a lower fee. Such practices were not uncommon in our line of work, which more often than not resulted in unfortunate outcomes. In short, no one expected much of me. The king had never even heard my name, Vanaril had no reason to believe that I would last, and even I did not expect much of my own future. But I did follow my curiosity, and it led me to being a somewhat average student of the magic arts. Vanaril did not like to impart us with any spells or skills that he thought might lead to unforeseeable events, so my knowledge of conjurings and ancient runes was quite limited. However, after months and months of meditation and exploration, I was finally able to sense and briefly even touch the power, which we call Kantara. About half of Vanaril's apprentices could do the same, of course, so even in this, I wasn't exceptional. Nonetheless, it proved to be a pivotal moment. It was only a few weeks after I first touched Kantara that the Fates attacked. To this day, I can't be sure what provoked their wrath. Rumors had it that the king was openly defying their edicts, and that he was encouraging his subjects to turn from the old ways. I suspect the Fates decided to put an end to his rebellious attitude before it could spread. Regardless, they launched a preemptive strike against Vanaril, the only warlock who could match their powers, and who might effectively defend the king from them in battle. I don't know how the attack began. I only know that Lucian, Vanaril's prize pet pupil, pulled me from my bed in the dark of night, to the sound of screams and of men dying. I stumbled out into the main hall, half naked, choking on the smoke that filled the air. I was scared, and completely confused. The far walls of the main hall were in ruins. They had been obliterated during the initial onslaught. Bodies lay everywhere. Vanaril stood in the gap where the walls had fallen, shielding us from the Fate's magic, but under great duress. Lightning split the air incessantly, blinding bolts streaking back and forth between the Great Warlock and the Fates. Lucian tried to run, but he was immediately struck by a wayward spell and rendered unconscious. I stood dumbstruck, unsure of how to help, or where to even go for safety. As the struggle between Vanaril and the Fates intensified, the earth itself began to tremble from the clash of their powers. Unable to withstand the intensity of their opposing spells, the ground itself caved between them. It cracked open, loudly, splitting apart from the pressure exerted by such tremendous magic. Dirt and dust filled the air. As the pressure of the conflict increased, both sides pressing harder and harder, this crack in the earth deepened into a canyon, a fissure in the world itself that kept expanding and widening until it became a veritable chasm, one that extended across the continent for hundreds of miles. And all the while, Vanaril and the Fates were still casting violent spells at each other from opposite sides of this gigantic void, which we now know as the Rift. Never before was there such a terrible battle of the arcane, and never again will there be anything like it. Finally, as the very last of his power drained from his fingertips, Vanaril looked back at me one final time. "Control the power, lad," he said. "It's your only chance." And then it was over. The Fates overwhelmed him at last, and pulled him from the main hall out into the open. For an instant, he hovered there in the air, high above the rift. And then he was cast down into the depths of the earth, never to be seen again. I recount these dramatic events exactly as I experienced them, so that you may understand just how completely powerless and overwhelmed I was at that moment. There I stood, a true novice in magic, trembling, having just lost almost everyone I knew in the greatest magical confrontation of all time. My story, and my very life, should have ended right there and then. I had barely even registered the loss of my master, when the Fates came for me next. I saw them floating towards me across the rift, intending to dispose of me, one of the last surviving disciples of Vanaril. I posed no threat to them, and they knew it. They approached me casually, confident in their victory. I suppose that in a way, it is to my weakness that I owe my very own survival, and my current strength. When I saw them coming for me, my legs turned to jelly. I wanted to flee, to run for my life, but my legs would simply not move. Instead, they gave way. I collapsed to my knees. I didn't even have the strength to make the Fates chase me. With no other options, I remembered Vanaril's advice. I reached out, and I touched Kantara in a state of complete panic. I tried to harness it, to control it as my master had said that I should. I had never succeeded in controlling the power in the months prior, and this time was no different. In desperation, with the Fates' laughter ringing in my ears and nothing left to lose, I abandoned everything that I thought I knew about spells, about magic, and about the power itself. I reached out to Kantara and touched it once more. But this time, instead of trying to control it as I had been taught, I offered to let it control me instead. I offered myself up as a vessel. I didn't specifically hope to destroy the Fates or save my life at that moment, as both of those notions seemed completely beyond hope. I just wanted to see what would happen. And since what had worked for others simply wasn't working for me, I tried the only option I had left. It is hard for me to describe what happened when I opened myself up to Kantara in that way. I felt it flooding into me, and I was so elated that I held nothing back. I did not ask it to destroy my enemies, nor to give me the long life I now have. I did not ask it for riches, for power, or for fame. No. Instead, I just offered it everything that I was and everything that I had, which clearly was not much at the time. Kantara surged into me, its will finally given free rein for the very first time. I became one with the earth and the sky. I became one with time itself. I remember reaching out my hand toward the fates, with no understanding of why I was doing it, and watching them suddenly burn to ash. Just like that. It took no effort. I was not the one doing it. You might think that destroying the fates themselves would have drained the power, or at least weakened it, but it felt as if I had only released a single drop of an entire ocean. I felt Kantara continue to well up inside me, with more power than any man could ever handle or dream of handling. I felt that I would be torn apart if I tried to keep it all within me, so I fell to the ground, and I channeled the power into the earth beneath my fingers. I gave Kantara everything that I had owned or ever would own. I gave it the very land that I walked on, and the air that I breathed. And the land beneath my fingers blossomed, right there and then. Flowers sprouted from the ground under my hands, and spread out around me like wildfire. I have never experienced anything like it. You already know what happened next. The tale of my vanquishing the fates spread throughout the land. When the king died, his heir could not fight the will of the people. He abdicated the throne in my favor, though I had never asked for it or even thought of claiming it for myself. Kantara thus spread to every inch of land under my control, bringing unprecedented prosperity and wealth to our people. I won't rehash the growth and expansion of Imperium that followed, because you already know that story, and because I want you to focus on this one thing right now. Imperium did not come to be because of my inherent strength, my power, or my wisdom. The values that founded our very empire were not ambition, greed, or even hard work. If anything, Imperium was born of a very weak man, through a haphazard mix of curiosity, a desire to explore, and a willingness to try things that others said should not be attempted. Well, that and a solid bit of luck, admittedly. So, as you journey through our illustrious academy, I hope that you can hold these same principles to heart. You may be feeling overwhelmed here, and that is perfectly normal. It is intimidating to walk among giants, and it may seem like each one of your peers here is already a legend in their own right. It is normal to feel small, unimportant, plain, and weak. And it is okay to actually be all those things. When your weaknesses and flaws are at their most glaring, when you feel like you simply don't belong, remember that I once felt that way too. Imperium does not grow in spite of our weakness. It grows because of our vulnerability and of our openness. So be curious, even when there is no reason to be. Explore anything that pulls at your interest, even when your peers scoff at your pursuits. And when the people you most respect, the people you hold in the highest esteem, tell you not to do something, respectfully acknowledge their advice, because they're probably right, and then do it anyway. Chances are, whatever you're trying will fail in spectacular fashion. So fail. Fail as often and as completely as you can. Who knows? Your failures may be the next thing to save the world, just as mine were. Emperor Nakuro, High King, and founder of the Imperian Empire. So that's the first chapter of Fall of Imperium. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments what change would make it even better, and we'll do it. See you next time.